Hi there, I'm Danny Thompson. Welcome to my lair, a place full of twisted dreams and sweet nightmares. And don't let the bedbugs bite.
And thank you, Danny. So welcome back to A View from the Bar. I'm Troy.
Hi, and I'm John.
And today's show, we're going to be talking about male horror protagonists, but more on that in a bit, because this week, just a few days ago as we record this, we've lost one of the great icons of world cinema in Sean Connery.
Yeah.
The original 007, and someone who was pretty much an ever-present, was just ever-present in many of the films that were very kind of meaningful to you and I as young people growing up in this world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always regard him as Indiana Jones's dad, sort of thing. So, yeah, very sad, and it's probably worth looking back over to some of the films, the lesser films, not lesser, but lesser well-known films. Outland was always one of my first films that I remember seeing that scared me a bit and stuff, and was quite gory and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, very sad news.
Yeah, very sad news. And like you mentioned Outland, I think that's a criminally underrated film. It's basically High Noon in space. And it's kind of it could almost like aesthetically could almost be set in the same universe as Ridley Scott's Alien. It looks very similar.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
it's like the Nostromo without xenomorphs.
Yeah.
Anyway, so our thoughts go out to Sean Connery's fans and family. So, on a slightly happier note, John, do you want to introduce how we came to this topic today?
Yeah, so a guy I've worked with we did a short called Salt, and he's a quite famous director now. In fact, he's pretty famous because he's the guy who directed a thing called Host, which was on Shudder, and basically I think it's like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and everybody, it's gone pretty crazy for it, and he's led him to be signed, I think, for Blumhouse and stuff. A guy called Rob Savage, who I worked with, he posted a tweet, which I'll read out now, which is horror Twitter. Genuine question. Can you name any legitimately great horror films with male protagonists? Not counting films where the lead becomes crazy, delusional, violent, a la The Shining. So I know, Troy, you posted a retort to that. So we've got a list here of films that maybe we want to talk about. So do you want to start us off? One that you...
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I wrote the list, so I'm guilty here. So John's free of blame.
Me.
This was literally just like the first 5 films that came to my head. So the first one, which was my immediate, when I saw the tweet, that was my immediate response, because it's like the obvious one, really, is John Carpenter's The Thing, which, we mention, I think, every single week. But it's the ultimate guy movie. It's so unusual. There's no female characters in it whatsoever, unless the Husky's female. I don't know.
The Thing might be female.
Well, yeah. I think the Thing can be anything it wants, but
exactly.
Anything it assimilates with. But there's so to be clear, we're talking about John Carpenter's 1982 remake of is it Howard Hawke? Thing?
Yeah, Howard Hawks, which does have female characters in, and obviously the prequel that everybody loves, does have a female protagonist, the main female protagonist.
But 1982's The Thing has no females in it, has no romantic subplot, which is one of the reasons, or two of the reasons perhaps, why it didn't do as well at the box office as it should have done. But I mean, you and I are massive fans of this film. I've seen it, I've God knows how many times, and it still scares me every time I see it. the claustrophobia and the paranoia and everything in there. But it's very, very rare that to have a film that has an all-male cast where they're all, protagonists really, until they get assimilated and then they become the antagonist.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that this is very much the very notion of probably because, and I think John Carpenter actually said this, is that he didn't want any romantic subplots distracting from the main core of the story. And I mean, it's great. It works very well for the fact that all you have this bunch of men trying to deal with some situation, and it's possibly not wanting to come across as sexist at all, but it probably is maybe representative, perhaps at that time, of what would possibly be the kind of makeup of a situation like that. I think, to me, when you talk about this male protagonist from the side of this kind of thing, that's where the decision lie why they would do something like that, because it is it's a male area, male zone as such, and the action takes place in it, and so you don't kind of want any distractions, and that, I think that's why it is such a great film, because it is just about what it's about, which is
and it's
horror and stuff.
It is men are mostly. I mean, obviously it's a generalization, because there's always differences. Like there are some very tall women, but you can say with confidence that women are generally shorter than men. Men are predominantly problem solvers. We don't tend not to overthink things too much. We just deal with the situation and try and solve the problem, which is why women get frustrated with us when they're trying to tell us their problems, because we try to solve the problems for them. They don't want us to solve the problems for them. They want us to shut up and listen to their problems. And what these guys in this film do is they're all trying to solve the problem, and they're doing it in a very pragmatic, masculine kind of way. There's no overthinking, and the only kind of anxiety is like the fact that their very existence is at risk. So it's very, very unique. I mean, I consider it to be like the Citizen Kane of horror films, not because it's an all-male cast, just because it's fucking brilliant. But it's very unique. It's a very unique viewing experience because of that, I think. You're not used to seeing that in films, because there's almost always, if not a female protagonist, then some kind of female love interest, or a femme fatale, or some kind of kissing going on, or romantic subplots and love triangles and all that. And there's none of that in this. It cuts all that out, and it's just all about the story and the horror and the survival and the paranoia and the claustrophobia and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's almost too it's almost non-sexist in its approach, because it is everything is on the tin. Like, this is the situation, it's this bunch of characters, and there's nothing else. All they're worried about is this thing that's happening, and we're not going to distract you with so and so.
There's no sex or gender, sexuality or any of that stuff. It's just the story and the problem at the heart of it.
Yeah, which in the Howard Hawks version, there is a love interest. I've watched it recently, and they actually do it quite well. And because it's Howard Hawks, it's a little bit like his Girl Friday sort of thing, where it's a bit of banter, and the banter is actually genuinely quite clever and quite funny. And the prequel never really had it as such, but there was definitely some googly eyes going on between the female and the helicopter pilot. I think it was helicopter pilot type thing, which you could tell in a different situation they would be lovers. So kudos they didn't just go down the road of them running around hand in hand all the time. But they had a little element in there, so which is maybe just as realistic in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, there's lots of amazing female scientists, etc., who would be, especially nowadays, in these situations and in these places. But then that's the interesting thing about, and I think that's why the John Carpenter version is quite strong, because it is just, we're not going to deal with that. This is just about this thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the problem. It's about the situation. It's about the monster. Because there is no sexual politics in it. So anyone can watch that film and be invested in the film and in the characters and in the story, and that doesn't matter. And I know a lot of women who are big fans of this film, probably partly because there is no sexual politics in it. It's just what it is, and you watch it and it's brilliant. Yeah. Okay, we could talk about The Thing forever, so we better move on, otherwise this is going to get long. So that was my number one choice. This is in no kind of order of hierarchical order, but the next one I put down was The Evil Dead. It seemed like an obvious choice. I mean, it is a great film. It's a very low budget film. I'm talking the first Sam Raimi Evil Dead from 1981. It's got a little bit of humour in it. There are female characters in it, but the main protagonist is Bruce Campbell's character Ash.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of he is this kind of unwitting hero. He has to rise to the challenge with this kind of thing, and obviously he's quite a low budget independent film. It's very low budget actually, and very independent, obviously. So it does kind of it does things quite straight, I think. His male protagonist is, like the man in the situation. He becomes the hero, and like you say, there is female characters and such, but our focus and our kind of point of view is pretty much always with Ash as our male protagonist.
Yeah, and then he obviously goes on. There was 2 sequels to that, and then he had his own TV series. And obviously, Ash is as a character, is a cult hero, and Bruce Campbell is a cult hero because of it. But he got more and more ridiculous and more comedic with each sequel. But that first one is, there's some dark moments in that. I know Sam Raimi has gone on record as saying he regrets putting it in there, but there's the tree rape scene, which is, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's still really uncomfortable to watch.
As you would hope, in a way.
Yeah.
Obviously not a pleasant thing. I think that was a little bit unfortunate, maybe with the way it was handled. Perhaps it was exploitation as well. So as soon as you have that kind of thing in there, it's a very delicate situation. I mean, I always think that things of that nature, things of most natures where it's quite invasive on people, should be, if you're going to portray them, it should be loyal to how terrible this thing is. That's why I wouldn't even want to say the phrase, but one of the rape scenes I would say I most admire, and the way it's done, is Irreversible, just because it is appallingly horrible, and that's what it should be. It's a portrayal to make you, this is a terrible, terrible thing.
I don't.
And it's not fluffy or anything like that.
I don't particularly want to watch rape in films. By all means, touch on the subject if it's necessary for the story, but I don't necessarily want to watch it. And it's like in comic books, there's a lot of rape. It's weird. There's a lot of rape in comic books. Alan Moore is quite rapey. Like, I'm not suggesting that Alan Moore is abusive in his personal life. I'm sure he's far from it. He's quite a feminist. But a lot of like there's a rape scene in or subplot in The Watchmen. There's an attempted rape followed by a then male rape in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. There's at least an attempted rape in V for Vendetta. Like pretty much everything Alan Moore's ever written has got rape in it, and I know he does it because it's powerful and it's making a statement and it's necessary for the story that he's written. But it's you don't need to see that. And we didn't need to see the tree rape in Evil Dead. And Sam Raimi, as I said, has kind of gone on record as saying he wished he hadn't.
I think going back to Ash's character, though, I mean, like his character as it develops, he is possibly a slightly uneducated male in his point of view towards women, which they do play for comedic effect. Hail to the King, baby, all this kind of stuff. He's definitely quite suited to maybe a 50s, 60s perception of women and men being the kind of, the breadwinners and being the kings of things, and women are his queens, type thing. So
it's a very ironic, tongue-in-cheek, kind of satirical piss take of that kind of, that golden era of Hollywood sort of action hero, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, and then number 3, which is an all-time favourite of mine, and I don't care what anyone says, I still believe this is a genuinely scary film in places, even if it does have dwarves in it, and that's Don Coscarelli's Phantasm from 1979.
Yeah.
An all-male... Well, there's not an all-male cast. There are women in it. There is a female character in it. Right near the beginning, there's the sex scene in the graveyard, but it's pretty much an all-male cast.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so maybe what I would say is, how do you feel it kind of approaches its protagonists?
Well, it's similar to The Thing in that there's no sexual politics in the film. It's just the story is about what's the character's name? Is it Cody? I think the boy's name. It's been a little while since I've seen it, but he's the main character really, and it's his story. It's about like a lot of these films is. A big element of it is about friendship and loyalty. He loses his brother, and then his brother's best friend kind of becomes the big brother. And then you've obviously got the bad guy in it who's awesome, which is the tall man.
Yeah.
Angus Scrim, and lots of dwarves, which is weird but scary. And those amazing in the mausoleum. You got the balls that drill into your head. I still remember seeing it for the first time, and when I saw that scene, I was just like, "Oh my god! Like this is exhilarating. It's exciting. It's horrific. I'm frightened. I love this film, and I'm going to love it forever."
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen it, like I say, but I definitely need to have a rewatch of it.
It's very low budget. The special effects are corny as hell. But it's atmospheric and it's got a great theme tune. I really like it, and it spawned about 5 or 6 sequels, and each sequel is increasingly crazier and makes even less sense than the previous.
That seems to be the normal way of things. So
yeah. And then number 4, I think, is a fairly obvious one, and so like The Thing. The Evil Dead is the odd one out on this list because it's the only one where it's like a leading man, a male protagonist. All the others, and I've chosen kind of quite deliberately because there's more than one male protagonist. They're kind of ensemble pieces. So number 4 is Jaws. Obviously, Roy Scheider's Chief Brody is the main protagonist in that, but then you've also got Quint, the Robert Shaw's salty dog, and Richard Dreyfuss's Hooper is the kind of the the third wheel, if you like. I mean, you and I are massive fans of Jaws.
One of the greatest films ever made. There's so much in it that's just awesome.
It's so quotable.
And yeah, from the male protagonist point of view, I mean, Roy Schneider's character is definitely he is our point of view on things. We kind of do see through his eyes, and without using the pun, but he is literally out of his depths in this. And Quint and Brody obviously are representing the two different sides of how to deal with this problem. One being, I suppose, an old-fashioned hunt it down kind of aspect, and Hooper being the scientific aspect. So there's this interesting kind of thing. And it obviously is a film of two parts. It is on land for the start and things like that, and then obviously the end sequence, which is, I don't know, must be a good 25 minutes, half hour, whatever, of them out in the boat. And then it's
probably like the entire third act.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly. He's probably by definition their third act, because that's you cut it off there, and that's when they go and hunt down the shark. And then it becomes it is a solitary male piece, almost like The Thing in a way. If you was to kind of just watch that, you are pretty much watching The Thing. And each character is, demonstrating their essence of maleness and masculinity within that. Obviously, the great sequence of them comparing, wounds and stuff,
comparing the scars, and then Robert Shaw's his kind of soliloquy about the Indian
delivering the bomb.
Which he wrote himself, didn't he?
That was the whole thing, wasn't it? That he wrote it.
There'd been 2 or 3 different versions of that scene, and they filmed it and refilmed it and refilmed it, and then it just didn't feel right. And then he went off and wrote it himself, came back, and I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe they just did it in one take, and they were like, okay, cut. It's
total genius.
Great film. And you're right, very interesting character dynamics between the three. Again, no sexual politics, but you've got 3 different versions of masculinity in that. Roy Scheider's kind of almost like a reluctant hero. He's just doing his duty. He has to do this to protect his town, to protect his family. You've got Hooper, and he's there out of curiosity more than anything else. He's
the outsider, isn't he?
He wants to examine and study the shark. And then you've got Quint, who's you like the old school drunken, toxic masculine kind of character. So 3 very different representations of masculinity, but they all get the job done eventually. And because in answer to Rob Savage, the 3 protagonists that didn't become any crazier than they were to begin with, and didn't turn into a psychopath.
Exactly. Quint was pretty crazy to start with, anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You could forgive. Any crazy.
And then number 5 is George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, 1978, which is again almost exclusively male cast. There is a female in it, isn't there? Because the pregnancy.
There's the girlfriend, who's pregnant.
But there's kind of 3 main characters, 3 or 4 main characters are all male, and again, like with Night of the Living Dead, the main character in this is African American, which was a kind of a George A. Romero thing. Which Night of the Living Dead, 1968. It was almost unheard of. 1978, it's not so unusual to have a black lead, but it's kind of unusual to have a black lead in a horror film who isn't the first one to die, as the old cliche
Yeah.
goes.
And probably the strongest character as well, the most one who keeps his head in this situation. I think that's what thinking about Day of the Dead as well. The black character in that, I can't remember his name, but he's the most knowledgeable in a way. He's the one who understands what's going on, and he's probably the least crazy of all of them. Definitely in that film, and in this film to an extent, there's a little bit of breakdown of the craziness, but not so much in Dawn of the Dead, as there is in Day of the Dead.
So we got 5 films there, 5 examples of horror films with strong male protagonists who aren't crazy or become crazy or become the problem. Like on that Twitter thread, somebody mentioned The Fly, and I'm like, that doesn't count because right, he didn't become crazy, but he became like a man-eating fly. So he's, but anyway, so some honourable mentions, because we can't talk forever. We can't mention every film, but there are some other ones. So we've got Get Out, The Exorcist, The Devil Rides Out, Audition, and Hitcher. So Get Out, I put that on the list because it's a more modern horror film, one of the better of the recent, because horror's kind of had a little bit of a mainstream resurgence recently, hasn't it? It's been
definitely
pretty good stuff over the last sort of, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, and Get Out definitely is one of the better ones, Jordan Peele. And again, talking, we talked about the black leading man in Dawn of the Dead. Obviously, Get Out. That's the whole premise of the film. Is that The Exorcist? Again, like male protagonist, the priest, who's the exorcist basically. And there was a point that you made when we were discussing this about the role. Like, it's unlikely, but certainly at the time, unlikely that would have been a female character.
Yeah, I think this is the interesting thing with some of this, and we'll probably talk about this in further episodes and stuff, and go into more depth and discuss it. But the very notion that the 2 main characters are priests does dictate, or Catholic priests does dictate that they will be male. I'm not sure on my history actually, and how much that's changed and when it's changed and stuff like that.
It has changed. I can't remember when, but I'm pretty sure you can ordain female priests.
Yeah.
Now, but not in 1973 or whenever The Exorcist was out.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing and something that we'll probably discuss, and it might be if anybody wants to bring it up in the comments, is like what films dictate to an extent the sex of their main protagonists, and also which films does it matter or it doesn't matter. For instance, to throw one up in the air would be Ghostbusters. We've obviously seen 2 different takes, a male version and a female version. Doesn't matter, not necessarily which one's better or not, because that's kind of not what it's about, but did it matter that the sex of them? And
no, absolutely not. Yeah, because literally anyone, it could be a Ghostbuster. Without getting into that, 'cause it's a whole different discussion. But yeah, one film was well made and one film not so well made.
Yeah,
but not because of the gender of the cast, but because it was just shit. Yeah. Sorry. The Devil Rides Out. I mentioned that because we've got to have shout out to Hammer. Obviously, most of the Hammer film, well, not all of the Hammer films, they had quite a lot of female-led stories. Like certainly, the Vampire Lover series and stuff like that had a lot of female protagonists in them. But Devil's Ride Out was the main characters were all, there was a female or a couple of females in it, but the main characters were all male in that. And then Audition, the Japanese film. Was that Takeshi Miike?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, and that's an interesting one because it's almost like a role reversal. You got the male protagonist who you could question the morality of him to begin with because of like the whole premise of the film, the audition that he sets up to find a potential wife, or that his mate sets up for him. But it's almost like role reversal in that, because usually in that, although it's technically not a slasher movie, it follows similar kind of sort of plot points to a lot of slasher movies. So you've got the antagonist and the protagonist, and the protagonist is usually like the female who's being chased by the psychopath, the bad guy, the serial killer, or whatever. And in this one, it's the other way around. He ends up being the victim, and she's the one doing the bad stuff, which ends with
terrible things.
One of the most uncomfortable scenes I've ever seen in like, I remember the first time I watched it, and I watched it on a Halloween night with the lights off and the curtains drawn, and after that end sequence, and it was a long time ago, back in the 90s, I was watching it on VHS, and the tape got to the end, and it was just white snow on the screen, and as the tape was just continued playing, because I couldn't pick up the the remote control to press stop and rewind. I was just sitting there like, what the fuck have I just watched? Completely frozen to the spot, just totally freaked out by it. So if you've never seen Audition, watch it. It's brilliant. But
it's a brilliant film.
Dynamic between the two characters.
And I think again that's one that kind of it works because it might not work and be as powerful if it was the other way around.
Yeah.
It subverts. So,
yes.
And especially in probably Japanese culture, the whole, submissiveness that is possibly expected of women, especially at that time, kind of thing. And it's also quite an uninteresting film to watch for the first 45 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you don't quite know where it's going and what it's doing, type thing. So, but that's what's so powerful about it, because
that's what makes that end sequence so powerful, is because like it's a payoff. You've sat for nearly 2 hours through this, and it starts to pick up a little bit by the third act, and you've had a few flashes of things, but then that final scene comes, and it's like, it's built and built and built to that point, and then when it hits you like you've been smashed in the face by Mike Tyson. And then The Hitcher with C. Thomas Howell, who's the main protagonist, even though he's possibly not the main character.
No, obviously Rutger Hauer's character, I'm guessing you could say he's the Hitcher and the main character. It is kind of through C. Thomas Howell's eyes that we're seeing a lot of this. And it definitely seems to be one that it's kind of it's similar to Jewel. You could probably add that to there, where it is there's possibly a product of the time, and obviously it wouldn't matter what the role is, whether it's male or female, but it does have a bit more of a subversion and strength that, for instance, like Jewel or like this, that you have a potentially reasonably strong male character who could deal with the situation, who's put into this, and then as it all goes completely crazy, and they're weakened as such by the course of the story, then it becomes possibly a bit more powerful with it. But then that's the great thing about when you do subvert it and you maybe have strong female characters who carry maybe an initial baggage that they are female. Certainly back in the day when, like it was probably more thing. We've obviously seen it now more, and we're used to this concept that female characters can be just as strong as male characters. But that's yeah. So there's different, and I think what's interesting with the list is certainly The Thing and Jaws plays very well with male, the concept of men in that situation, and benefits from that, because it does bring a certain knowledge and baggage to the audience of what to expect, and then you can play around with it and subvert it and change it around. So
yeah, and it's, I mean, I understand the purpose of Rob's tweet, because, and this is something that we've talked about before, and we talked about on the Halloween episode with the Laurie Strode characters. There's a lot of strong female protagonists in horror films. You know, there's very much a trend at the moment in films to have either female-led films or films with strong female characters in, but you've got an entire history of strong female characters in horror films over the years. You know, John Carpenter, Dario Argento, they've all done it, and it's, so it is kind of not unusual, but it's, you know, you don't as often get the strong male protagonists in horror films as you do in other film genres. It's you know, it's a much more even playing field in that respect, and more often than not, the main male characters turn out to be the bad guy, or they turn out to just be a bit shit, which I think is, you know, you do that with horror because it's, you know, you're kind of tricking the audience in some respects, but also because, you know, perhaps in some cases it's more believable, or you're going to be more invested in a slightly more vulnerable female protagonist than you are in, you know, like a Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sly Stallone style male protagonist.
yeah. I think this is definitely a future episode that we can discuss this further. And there's a lot to say. We can obviously comment on the sexism of Hollywood through the years and how that has changed, and how horror has been sometimes a good place, especially because it is also a place for exploitation and sexploitation. And you could almost say, you could argue that maybe some of the Hammer stuff, it does have female characters, protagonists, but that's probably because they're hot and they take their clothes off, and that's the Hammer kind, you know, like the Hammer kind of side of it. It's still the 60s or the 70s, and it's still sexist. So that's definitely something I think we should further on. Was that, sorry? Sexist
or sexy?
If we're going for the older Spinal Tap here, what's wrong with being sexy?
So to qualify this, we're going to do a follow up on this, and we're going to do some of our favourite female protagonists in horror films, as well, because there is a lot of them, and some great films to talk about. So why the hell not?
Absolutely, and you can then take it on to further sides. You know, could you imagine The Thing if how many gay characters were there in The Thing?
Yeah, or you know, would The Thing work if it had an all-female cast? And you know, if it was done as well as the first one, absolutely. You know, taking the sexual politics out of it, the gender and the sex and the sexuality and even the gender identity of the characters doesn't matter if the story makes sense and if the characters and the setting make sense and you're invested in it. That's all that matters. So anyway, I think we can wrap this one up there. So we've been Sweet Nightmares. If you've got any comments on this, if you want to tell us we're wrong, if you want to hashtag me to us, just do it down in the comments. Give us a thumb up or a thumb down and all that bollocks. And we'll catch you later.
Cool. Take care.